Hi, welcome to Project Instigate. I want to speak to you about an important subject today, and it's adaptability in leadership. Adaptability in leadership, as we know, is really important. But what is it, and how can a leader be more adaptable? Adaptability is our ability to adjust to change quickly. So think about it this way. When you're working in an organization or you're leading something and things don't go as planned, how do you handle that stress? When things don't go the way you'd like to, do you get stressed or do you get excited about an opportunity, or do you get curious? Do you get curious about outcome, about what if I did this? How would this end? What if I tried that instead? Do you get into this step-by-step mode and put together a team and find a solution, or do you shut down? We all have a fight, flight, or freeze response. It's intended to protect us. It's intended to protect us from danger. However, it's not always justifiable. A leader must always listen to their gut feeling. That being said, having fear and anxiety around a new situation and circumstance it's normal. However, we as leaders, we have to be able to identify which fears are more reasonable than others. We can't possibly say that, oh, your fear is not reasonable. When I say reasonable, it means, are we just fearful because something has changed or become very unexpected, or that we need to try different strategies? Is it excitement or is it fear? Fear being that gut feeling that something is not right. Something's just wrong. It's not in line with your values. You don't feel good about it. Being able to differentiate between the two is really important. Now, how can someone be more adaptable? We know our brain goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode when faced new situations and circumstances. And we know that it's important for us to be able to get out of that and recognize where we need to work on our personal growth, push ourselves outside our comfort zone, and take on new challenges. But how do we do that? How do we become more adaptable to change? The answer to that is it's encompassed in identity. We tend to tie our identity into things, and oftentimes in some pretty stupid things. When we tie our identity in something, letting go of that thing becomes really hard. And that makes it harder for us to adapt to change. So one of the ways that a person can become more adaptable is start to recognize what areas are you tying your identity into. Something as simple as, your favorite foods. If you have your identity tied up into your favorite food, trying different foods or giving up certain foods is going to be harder. Let's say you have a political perspective or view, and you've made that political ideology as part of your identity. In that case, when someone comes to you with a new perspective, with a different perspective, it's going to be harder to look at the problem from different situations, because if you do, then you'll feel like you lost a part of yourself. Even something simple like, oh, what's your favorite color? What is your favorite place to eat? How do you like to speak? A lot of these things we have our identity tied up into. Traditions, we associate our identity with traditions with culture, with language, with a lot of these things. And that's where a lot of the times we start to stereotype, we start to discriminate, and we create this us versus them situation. So a big part of being adaptable to change is understanding where you should and should not, where you should and where you should not tie up your identity. So is your identity tied up in the car that you drive? Is that going to make it harder for you to switch to a different type of vehicle? What about your living situation? Is your identity tied up to a certain level of comfort levels, or the type of work you do? Or let's say you like to do, for me, for example, I'm a very policy and program development type person. But if I have to take on an entirely different role, think things differently, I am going to have to let go of my identity that I'm the policy and program development person. For example, when I started Project Instigate, I had to adopt a lot of different roles. A new entrepreneur, especially a sole entrepreneur, has to start out by taking on many roles. You're your own accounting department, you're your own marketing department, you're your own operations department, you're everything. You're taking on so many different identities. And then when they become part of your identity and then you start to develop a team, people can't let go. People can't let go of control. They can't delegate because they have tied up their identity in this role that they've created themselves, this omnipresence role within an organization. And this is where we see a lot of leaders, management, people in charge struggling to develop high performance teams, struggling to develop and develop high performance team and delegate work as needed because they can't let go of control, because it all comes back to what they've tied up their identity in. So the trick to be more adaptable is to let go of your identity. Now, you don't want to let go of, or the idea that your identity is tied up into something materialistic or a certain situation or a certain environment. Similarly, even in relationships, some people have difficulty firing and other people have a really easy time letting people go in their companies. Relationships, romantic relationships, people tend to tie up their identity into something like being in a relationship, and then they have a really hard time not being in a relationship. So it's really important for us to observe where we are tying up our identity. And by acknowledging that, now there are some things in which we should tie up our identity. And this is where knowing your core values and your life's mission and vision statement is important. If you know what your life's purpose is and what your core values are, those are the things that you should tie your identity around. Whether that's credibility, whether your value is spirituality, or your value is honesty and integrity. Those are things we absolutely must tie up our identity. Otherwise, there will not be any consistency in our personality and will become too unpredictable for people to trust. But beyond that, we really should try our best to not tie up our identities into things that don't matter in our progress, in our growth, in our personal, professional, or organizational growth. That right there is the key to adaptability in leadership.